So this here is a Lee, I guess a manual reloading kit, as opposed to one with a turret and press and all that stuff. So I do have a one-off kind of press thing going on here from Harbor Freight. I think it's like 50 bucks that I use with it, but it's made to be used, I believe, with a hammer or a mallet. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how that use is done, and I'm going to do it with these 44 Magnum rounds. I'll just do one. You can see they're dirty, they're fired. These have been reloaded a few times. I'm not going to go through the trouble of making everything perfect. But anyway, you would take your shells with the primers in them, and you would pop out the primers. So I'll go ahead and show you that. So please, whenever you use one of these little presses that I'm about to demonstrate, please make sure you understand the powder that you're using and the projectiles or the bullets that you're using when you reload. The combinations of what's supposed to go where, how much, how far to press, all that stuff is covered in common charts, okay? But it is not, it's not something to be taken lightly. You can hurt yourself, you can break your gun, you can, a lot of bad things can happen. Too little propellant can cause a bullet to lodge in your barrel, causing the next round to blow your barrel apart. Too much can break parts of your gun, can blow your hand off. Like, a lot of bad things can happen not loading the stuff right. So please get the appropriate charts, measure your stuff, weigh it with a good scale, use the appropriate measuring kits, double check what you're doing, read the manuals, learn how to use these charts, always double check with an accurate scale. Just please, caution all the way. Don't play with this stuff if you don't intend to take it seriously. You should be nervous and scared and sweating when you do it. If you're not, you're either you're well practiced or you're not taking it seriously. So just don't hurt yourself. Be very careful with these procedures. So intended for the kit is this a mallet like this. Doesn't have to be all pretty like this, but it should be a heavy, dense rubber mallet. To knock out the primer, you use this tool, at least I do. Put your handy dandy shell there so the primer can go through the hole. And you take this apparatus and you put it into the hole there. And give it a whack. And now your primer is removed. If you reload primers, you can save that guy and do something with it. I don't know how to do that, but I still save them. Then you take your shell and all the others that you would deprime and throw them into a little tumbler. So this tumbler has walnuts and it's Hordney, whatever, however you say that. It's got walnut shells, both fine and large. And you would put the shell in there, turn it on, and let it rip. And you let it sit there and go for maybe about, I don't know, an hour. Some people put liquid in there. I like to do it dry. Even though it's not best, I prefer to do it dry so that the Yeah, I'm not messing with the fluids and messing up the medium. That's typically what I do. So after you've tumbled your deprimed shell, which this has not really been tumbled, I mean, it's just there for like 30 seconds. You take this tool and you go and make sure you put it in the right end. This is the crimping end. See, it doesn't really go in, it just stops. You can see the lip there. This is the end you want. This is going to squeeze the shell back down because it's expanded after being fired. And what you can do is you can put it on this base. I like to use the press here, but you can put it on this base. It's best to put it on a concrete floor or a block of steel or something like that. If I start beating on this bench, the phone's going to jump off and just go, it's going to be problematic. So I'm going to go ahead and use this press against its base, and I'll bring this closer so you can see what happens here. So just crank this down, and what you want to do is you want to make sure it's completely flush. Okay, no room for slack here. And then after doing that, you take the same dude with the hole here and you would turn it upside down, put this on top of it, and you'll take this long rod that's in your kit. The knurled end I beat the crap out of, and I consistently keep the knurled end for the hammer. The mallet's not going to work well for this. You'll tear up your mallet. But anyway, you would put it in there, hit it hard with a steel hammer, and beat it out. Not too hard. You don't want to destroy the shell. You'll get a sense of it. Or if you've got one of these little Harbor Freight presses, I have this longer bit here that's hardened steel. I put it in there, and well, what I do is, it's got like these little recesses. I put it on the second to the smallest recess, and you got to put some elbow grease into it, but it'll come out. And now it's reduced in size. You can measure it, but it brings it back down to the size it needs to be for loading the bullet. Okay, so we got that. The next thing to do is to flare the end. So to flare the end, you take this tool and put it in the top, and you can hit it with your mallet, or you can use the press. You don't want to hit it too hard because then you'll destroy the shell. But we got it down in there, it's flush, and then you just pop it out. So now it's flared, and if you have a bullet handy, we'll take one of these 180 grain XTPs, and you can see it fits in there. So just a little bit. It stops right where the flare is, because the rest is for pressing. Okay, so we got that, and we'll go to the next step. So for the next step, what we want to do is we want to prime the shell. Now I'm going to use a used primer. I'm not going to put a new one in here because the shell needs to be cleaned, and I don't want to waste a primer. They're just too valuable. What you do is you use this piece. Alright, that's a little flexible part where the center stays up. You put the primer inside that hole. Okay? And then you take your shell and you're going to put it over that hole. And what I do, there's probably better ways to do this, but you'll feel it fit into the recess of where the primer belongs. And I take the flaring tool, and I prefer to use my drill press as a press for this. It's just more comfortable, but I'll go ahead and use this press, or it'll work just as well. You can use your hammer, or I'm sorry, your rubber mallet. I just don't like striking the primers. The first time I used this thing, I did use the mallet for all my primers. I loaded 200 rounds and didn't have any problems. So I'll go ahead and put this down. It doesn't take much pressure, and you can see the primers back in there. Okay. Now you want the primer to be flush, like definitely flush. So I can feel that it's kind of sticking up. You might be able to see it, you might not. You can kind of tell if you put it on something. It'll rock a little bit. I guess it's okay. It's not as bad as it seems, but it's not perfect. But you want it to be flush. You want to feel it. This one's been dimpled already, so I might be feeling that effect. Anyway, this is for inserting the primer. Let's go to the next step. So I bought one of these cheap but worthwhile scales. This one closes, has its own little case. It's got a little calibrating weight. I won't go into all that. If you buy one without a calibrating weight, I suggest you buy the calibrating weight that goes with that scale. Some are 200 grams. This one I think is 50 grams. Yeah, you can see 50. And calibrate it periodically. And then what you want to do is you want to take your shell, which I just set on here, and turn it on so that it's zeroed. Okay, and I have it set to grains. Okay, GN is grains. And then what you want to do is have that zeroed. Then you would go over with your appropriate measures. I guess I should show you that. Over here I've got, this place is a mess. I don't normally do this with all this clutter. But here's the a pack of powder measuring scoops. What you want to do is you want to take your powder and weigh it to the spec that you know to be right. So I use the H10 Hodgdon, or however you say that, powder. I keep it in a pill vial so that it is, I'm not constantly opening the large jar, and I'm only exposing it in smaller quantities to the atmosphere and the humidity. I keep my powder in a cool, dry place. So you scoop out the goods, the powder. This particular measure requires one of these 1.3 cc 1300 cc scoops and an additional 50 cc or 0.5 cc's. Sorry, there it is there. 0.5 cc's. It's not focusing. All right. So it's quite a bit of powder, but this is a slow burn magnum powder, and in this particular case, there's supposed to be a lot of powder there. So that's what we want. Well, for this round, okay, this round has enough room for the powder. If I put something like this round, this 240 grain round, it's going to compress the powder. It's not safe. It's a problem. You want to make sure that you're reading charts that tell you what to use with what projectile. So I'm going to dump this powder out, and I'm going to get to the bullet without powder in there. One quick thing. I did dump the powder out. I refilled it. When I put the empty shell, what was empty, on there, you can see now we're at 27 grains of powder. And that's what I want for the chart that I'm using. I'm not sharing the chart because I don't want somebody to improvise with the chart that I have. You are more than welcome to go out and get your own chart. I use one from Midway USA. I have one specifically for 44 Magnum and one for 357 Magnum. And I don't reload anything else. I don't pay attention to the other charts. That's just me. Anyway, we'll get on to putting the bullet in. So what we're going to use is 200 grain bullet from Acme Bullets. This fellow, this fellow again, and this guy again. And what you do is take your shell with the primer. Remember, I didn't replace it with a fresh primer, but assuming it were fresh, put it in here, and it's safe from contact with the bottom of this piece. Then you take this tool, and you'll not use the crimping side. You can tell if you put the crimping side, it'll only go so far. You're going to take the other side and put it on there. Then you take your bullet, drop it in down there, and you take this tool, which has an adjustable height. So you can unscrew this and get the height just so. I've already adjusted the height for this bullet because I've loaded a bunch of these. And then I use my drill press as a press to crank it down. And if we take a look, we can see the bullet is safely in there right at the crimp level and ready to be crimped. Now this is also important. When you crimp it, you don't need this anymore. When you crimp it, use the other end, and that's going to go on here. Now hopefully we can see some before after stuff. That's the wax from the bullet. If you feel this, I don't know if you can see it, but if you feel, you can see it's not crimped, as opposed to what will happen right now. Just a little crank, little pressure. You can kind of feel it. Now it's crimped. See, it's kind of hugged in there. Okay? And then you're good. You're ready to go. If this were a live round. It's not.